Hi. So currently this is Jack Siegel, and if you've been paying attention, I have something different. It's a haircut. Sorry, I wanted to work on comedic timing, and so it's always fun to ask like the question of how do you make something seem absurd or turn something kind of common into a joke, or I guess technically uncommon. Looking at Sun Tzu and the Art of War, what is comedy sometimes, but the unexpected, and or remismashing of things. And it might be fun to do an actual study of it because then it means I can deliver jokes better. And going from the self analysis of thinking, hey, I think I might be able to do something with this, to doing something with this. So, the cool thing about this shot is that it misses everything behind me that is complete horror story. It is a complete horror story. So, if you're ever wondering about your life and how it's going, sometimes being able to lie and show just the best parts of you, you know, it happens. And for me, I am actually a very disorganized person. So I need to work on that. One of many things. So I think in the book, The Answer by John Assaraf or Murray Smith, there was a reference to how it's useful to have on your team people that play at what you have to work at. And so for me, I also have to find a way to be depending on people and working with them because I'm not exactly the strong independent sort, but I'm the stubborn sort that doesn't want to rely on people. And, that can be a detriment to anyone within a sort of system because systems compound and multiply themselves through synergy, at least ideally. Um, that being said, the human system is not necessarily, I don't know if you could say synergy because you can think of, say, for example, Voltron with the five lions coming together or the Animaniacs or the Megazords coming together and forming the giant Ultra Megazord or whatever. And it's the littler components that can function independently that when they come together, there's a synergy with them. But for example, with the human body, the eye, I think literally there's a scripture that says the eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you. No, you need the whole thing. You technically could kind of get away with having feet, if it was between having everything else but feet or eyes. Yeah, that's kind of like one of those tough ones. Kind of makes you think that's where the this or that. Would you rather be missing a leg or foot or be missing your eyes? It's like not being able to walk versus not being able to see. It's like which would make it easier? In those days, you know, I don't know, did you have peg legs back then for the Israelites? And I guess this is all trying to say that, I haven't made anything for about a week. I felt like that I was not exactly led to not do that, but it's just that consistency is sometimes a battle for me, unlike other people where consistency is more natural. I think when I was reviewing this in my own head, I was thinking that, emotionally I wasn't exactly the doing the best and kind of more I know what to do and what to say, but I don't do it. So, as Jesus admonished people, he's like, hey, do as the Pharisees say because they know to do and they talk about it, but don't do as they do because they don't do it. But, that kind of ties in with realizing that sometimes you are emotionally down. Me, it's dealing with, relationships and someone I like and making sure I don't get rear-ended and not fore-ended. And the thing is that takes up some mental real estate or makes you think you're crazy because they're on your mind, and that takes you away from seeing the present because you're wondering about the future or wondering about the past. And so the present cannot really be enjoyed, or you don't function as well. And it might be easy to also admonish myself because there's having an organized plan, there's addressing the plan, which reminds me I forgot to clock out my time card. And it's like bad, but it's like bad llama, bad. It's like, am I allowed to steal lines from Disney movies? We're gonna find out, people. And, you know, being emotionally affected by things, that can easily segue into discussing, you know, who do you have in your life, and are they people that are there that add stability, or is it that people that kind of destabilize things? Now, being mindful that, was it that there was a lack of investment by one side or both sides into the relationship? And so even if you have a good person, things can fall apart simply because there's a lack of investment. And, you know, it felt like it had gotten to a point where I was giving, but I wasn't getting back or receiving. And that hurt. And maybe this is just going to be a personal journal entry moment. And, there's something about not admitting the truth to yourself or being blind to things. There's the making assumptions. I always joke that with sometimes it's someone can say everything, and yet when you listen to them, it's like, I have no clue what you just said. Sorry, I used to go with astrology, so it's like all the water signs are like, I know what you're saying exactly. Yeah, I know. You try to listen to someone, it's like, I have no clue what you just said. Are you a water sign? Just trying to get away from the astrology, but it felt like a fun aside. Um, no, but when we pour ourselves into something and it doesn't work out, lately I've been trying to do a rebuilding process of sorts. I wasn't married to the person, felt like it was someone to be married to, and I poured a lot into it. Now the person wasn't exactly at the right space for anything, but they, from my perspective, it seemed like they were in the right space for everyone else but me. So whether God has restoration because I think there's good attributes to the person, and maybe it was just getting to a point where it wasn't a healthy dynamic. It's just asking, what do you do in the meantime? What do I do in the meantime? So as things fall apart, what do we do? And, maybe it's something as simple as getting a haircut, something as simple as trying one more time with something new and different. The only thing I could say I really did was try to do some biblical humor, which I'll upload, but it's going to be like more audio. Although I'll try doing a routine right in a little bit to play around with it. Sorry, I so thought there was shadows over here. I'm like, oh my God, you're merging with me. So only one car at a time, people. And like, and yeah. But aside from processing errors and having to process information and realize, hey, I need to merge into traffic and not die, there's also realizing that sometimes, sorry, there's a coolant system temperature indicator here, and realizing that I can't let it get too high. Right now it's at 192, which is within tolerance, but anything creeping over 207 to 212 to 220, danger zone area. So needing to make sure I at least kind of keep an eye on that. But there's doing your best where you're at with what you have and realizing that God will work with it. And sometimes working with it is just creating that consistency. Or sometimes it's realizing that, God may use this to minister to someone, which is a fancy way of saying like, hey, if he's trying to make it and you never know, I might make it big. I want to do a story where this gets seen hundreds of years later and has an impact. And sometimes we don't know what legacy does. Sorry, I'm thinking Machiavelli's The Prince. There's books that have legacy. It's like, how have different books impacted people and who can point to that book and say, hey, this changed me? A lot can say the Bible. I think a number of people say Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Um, but sometimes it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different information and experiences, but there's key kernels that really affect transformation. So aside from trying to sound smart, the I haven't really succeeded in too much, just trying to encourage a friend that's also dealing with their emotional stuff, relationship stuff, and they're getting to the gym. I have to make sure that I heal, because whether it's restoration with a person or it's something else with someone else, we don't want to take our baggage with us. We want to heal. And so listening to Christian prophetic ministers online, there's a few that were speaking to me that I felt drawn to, and it's just like the restoration and everything else, but then there's a need for healing. But, sometimes in the midst of waiting, or the wilderness season moment between what was and the promise and getting forward to that, there's those better times ahead. There's needing to transition and keep plodding along. And sometimes the looking back, Egypt with relationships would be, you knew that was dysfunctional, keep going forward. But you look at the good times behind you, which is representative of Egypt. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, they thought back about how in Egypt they had plenty of food to eat and how it wasn't so bad, but now they're going to die out in a desert. It's like, hey, why do you want to take us out here, Moses? Like, Egypt wasn't good to die there? Like, come on. So again, whether it's self-imposed or God-imposed or, circumstance, there's realizing that in those transitions, you may be going from an unhealthy situation to a healthier one. If it's with the same person, it's, as one pastor was mentioning their testimony, I think it was a she. She was mentioning how, I'm going to change this person so it's no longer going to be the same person that cheated on you, but it's going to be the old outside but a new inside. And so, when you hear about difference between forgiveness and repentance, when you forgive someone, that's saying like, you don't owe me anything. That helps out psychologically. It makes you right with God, but there's working on that to a point where that doesn't have that bitterness in there. But then it's not saying that you necessarily go back into a relationship with them or do anything else with them. There's a need to rebuild trust. They can turn away from what they did to hurt you, but with God, God's faithful, but he is also omnipotent and omniscient. And omniscient meaning that he knows everything. Omnipotent is all powerful. So, he knows if you're playing him or not. And so but he's faithful to forgive. That's only if you like turned away from what it was. Now with people, we aren't all knowing. The Holy Spirit may be giving guidance, but it's just, there's that's a faith walk right there sometimes. And so establishing trust again and credibility, that person that you forgave, if you're seeking to restore the relationship, there's, boundaries, and making sure that that access is warranted, letting them in. Is it based on them not just saying they're going to change, but actually showing fruit of repentance, or in this case, showing that they've actually changed? If it was before there was infidelity and lack of you being a priority, are they now making your priority in terms of effort and timing? And again, there's realizing on their other end that, what if they fully change and they are no longer the same person? God knows it, but now it's like on your end, it's like, hey, you may have to be asking for forgiving them and forgiveness on your heart, because, wounds can run deep. And asking God to be like, hey, help me. Like, I know you're guiding me here. They're truly changed. Like, just imagine that, right? 100% that person has changed. They have screwed up, but now they turn away, they repent. Like, for the rest of their life, they're never going to do that again. But you're holding on to that bitterness and hurt. You and it hurts. Like, and if you don't deal with it, time does not heal wounds. It just covers it up and it scabs over. And until you rip it open and pull out I think Derek Prince mentioned the idea of shrapnel, that is in a wound that you can press on it and it still hurts. And so it prevents proper healing. It's realizing that there can be a restoration, but it's a lot of work. And so sometimes it's easier to move on. But realizing that in either case, you're still going to have to do some work, because the expression being triggered refers to the idea that there's something that happened in one's past that now sets one off later on. I remember someone teasing me, and they were acting angry over something trivial, and that triggered me. I'm like, I know that's supposed to be funny, but that's bothering me. I'm sorry. And you may have similar triggers. It's just, it's one thing to identify them. If you at least are able to identify them, at the very least, you can make sure that it's not being brought in, and you can now actively work on it. So aside from discussing transparency and saying like, hey, I want to get on a rhythm here. Yeah, this is not a very encouraging word, except that it might have substance for one person, and it helps me get back into a vibe or flow of things. Some successes were I was breathing, got a haircut. I went up there with a bad mood. I'm looking at my friend Jessica Degani, and then there's Richard Degani, her husband, and they've been doing my hair. Well, she has been doing my hair for a bit, and I'm like looking at her. It's like I'm not in a good mood, and it's like, is it because of me? It's like, no, it is not because of you. I'm just not in a good mood, and it's good when you can have people accept you where you're at. Find those. Those are good to cherish and invest in. There's going to be a lot of acquaintances in our lives, and The thing is, you may not have a need or desire to invest in things, but there's knowing who's worth investing into and who's not. Um, I joke about what's called the 300-pound fat person test, and that's not to knock anyone, but you know, if you have people in your life that are trying to be in your life and you're trying to see if they're legitimate or not, or if your motives are pure or not, the question of would you do the same thing for a 300-pound ugly fat person? Just the reason that came up was because I had a friend and he was helping someone out. They were in jail and sending them gifts, money, and trying to make sure they're okay financially in there. And I'm like looking at the guy, and it's like, okay, like I'm a helpful person. I'm like, well, would you do this if they were unattractive and 300 pounds? And he kind of looked at me weird, and I think he kind of scrunched his face, and he's like, a kind of indecisive moment, I think. And for me, it's because I've done that. I've helped out. Well, I have had a friend at the same time that was in jail, that similar circumstantial moments, as in, I could say that I'm not getting anything from that person. I'm not investing in that to win someone over. And if he watches this, it's, that was a God-led moment. And that was where, like, I poured into that. Now, I didn't go overboard like this person was, but, it kind of sussed out that he was interested in her romantically. And, if he wasn't having those expectations, he wouldn't go so far. And perhaps going back to that, my issues and stuff, trying to win someone over by putting yourself out there, it it happens, and it's a question of what do you do now. But aside from that, if you're trying to figure out if someone in your life is worth keeping around, you probably ask them or ask yourself, are they just that way with me, or is it with everyone? That may not make you feel special, but at the very least, you know that there's no other underlying motive. Or they may be direct. I'm pretty direct. I'm like, I want to get married to you. Sorry, there's a red line over the thing. And it's like, and I can wait. And I'll treat this as something to pour into and support. And we may need to switch over to Plan C, which is a reference to the, not anime Yukikaze, but the Legend of the Galactic Heroes, the new version, where Plan C was the option selected because, in a, it's just interesting hearing the noise. But in one of the protagonists or heroes, he's Yang Wen Li, when he's in a combat simulation for like a kind of a class project raid thing, he ends up beating another guy, but it's because he executes a plan or Plan C, and you can imagine that he created several contingencies based on what the other tactician would do, and it just immediately flipped on. So in this case, Plan C is emergency venting of the heat from the engine because the coolant level's at 207, and allowing it to creep up further is bad. Fortunately, though, we can roll down the windows, function. But, all that other stuff, there's, who do you let in your life? Someone that will have you during the good times and the bad. Probably more like during the bad times. And, those are more likely the relationships worth pouring into, investing in, because you know that they'll stick with you and during the worst times, honor them during the best. Or I think, is one Facebook meme pointed out. You know, this father was inviting everyone to a barbecue, and he told his daughter to go out and invite everyone. And what happened was she went out and told everyone, like, "Hey, there's a fire! There's a fire! Like, help us out at the house." And the ones that the father wanted to come out didn't show up, but the ones that did come out were not greeted with a fire that was raging and going to destroy his property. They were greeted with a fire from a barbecue. And, the father's like, "What's up? I didn't tell you to do this. Why didn't you bring our neighbors and our friends?" "Well, father," she went, "your supposed friends didn't come to help you out during your time of need. These people did. They didn't realize that it was just a test of sorts. And they came out during the worst of it when you really needed them. But everyone else stood around. These are the ones you need to honor and take care of, not the ones that would flake on you." So, and now if that triggers you, it's okay. It means that, how did we get here? So, with relationships, for example, I might have to do boundaries and make sure not to function ambiguity, being hopeful, or not to overextend myself. In your case, if you got triggered over that example, it might be simply to say that learning to trust people is based on, you probably know enough to at least sort out, at least from a superficial level, who's probably not going to be there for you. And not too many people are. I could be wrong on that, but I'm probably one of those people that will be there for you unless you burn a bridge with me or you abuse that right with me. Or not exactly privilege, but yeah, I got you. I'm learning boundaries though, and so that might go into a book by Adam Grant about givers and takers. And then there's people that will put in and take out, give, like, work on exchange, right? Tit for tat. And so Adam Grant mentioned the whole idea that there's some people that are just natural givers and they'll give you the shirt off their back. Then there's natural takers that will just take that shirt off your back. And it's just how they work. Jordan Peterson mentioned the acronym OCEAN, which it's amazing how loud things are. And you may not be able to hear anything, which is perfect. That's exactly why I like this. I would turn off the headset so you can hear, but that shuts off that piece of equipment. But in OCEAN, there's something called agreeableness. And, talking with a friend, we were mentioning about assertiveness training and everything else because he will sacrifice for his loved ones and make sure they're okay. In some situations, he'll sacrifice because he has to. But there's kind of 4 types or 5 types of approaches with negotiating. There's the win-win solution, which means that everyone wins and gets like more or what they want. There's compromise, which means that you win a bit, you lose a bit, but at least you get something. There's the win-lose scenario, which is obviously that is now the middle finger. That wasn't intentional, but someone loses and someone doesn't win. Wait. Someone wins and then someone loses completely. At least in a compromise, both people suffer a little bit, but they get a little bit. So in a win-lose scenario, which I think it's considered to be aggressive competition, the one person suffers. Now, there's quote unquote suffers because there's sometimes it has to be all or nothing. And so, if it's you're an innocent person on trial, it's like, no, we're not compromising here. No, I want to go for winning. But a compromise or plea deal moment might be where even though you're actually innocent, there's no way you can win it. So the best you can do is a compromise, which is unfair in that case, but it's better than a total loss. Um, so that would be an unfair situation in which, there's, that's why you would fight for an all or nothing scenario. Then there's also considered withdrawing, which is saying that it's not worth it for you to invest in. So you'll take the loss for the sake of the relationship or because you can't fight it or you don't want to fight it or you won't fight it. And those happen. That's okay. Then finally, there's a lose-lose scenario, which seems like a fun one. I'm probably the sort, I made the joke that the reason I need to work on forgiveness and learn to let go. And, if you're working on that yourself, there's asking God to help you, but there's also realizing like God bless them, because apparently as gold gets refined 7 times in this trial, it's like, I thought it was good Christian. And now all this stuff is bubbling up in my head. I'm like, okay, we got to pray this out. Hide that underneath the table or something. And the thing is that, I don't know where I'm going with this, that realization that there's a lot in there, it's like, okay, let's work on that. And it's not necessarily hoping for the best. It's go for that. Vehicle engine temperature is approximately 183 degrees Fahrenheit. Go team. I would kick on the AC, but at this point, we're already here. So, right, lose-lose. I would cut my nose to spite my face. Like, as in, like, hey, I'm not happy. May you be cursed, and may that curse fall upon me too. That's not good. That is not coming in place from healing or Christianity or anything. Like, if it means that you can either watch a person suffer as you suffer or that they can be happy, but you can also be happy, I should pick the choice that makes me happy. And we say karma or the vengeance is the Lord's, but, as a Christian, I should be wishing for the best for them, even if they hurt me. And so if you're wondering how a Christian is supposed to walk, it's probably better than this, but it's realizing that, I may call people out on their stuff, but I also do look at myself and go like, yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm not sure what else to say, except that we're working on a much shorter word. But hi, hopefully you're well. Currently heading to the gym, trying to work on being more physically fit. This seems like it's coming in. I'm currently doing exercises meant to go for hypertrophy or size right now. But we'll probably switch over to endurance and more focus on strength and functional strength while we focus on slimming down. But you know, if you're not being too productive because you're emotionally down, again, sometimes count your what you have done good. And sometimes that bar needs to be set really low. So don't kick yourself if you're not striving for the stars when you're emotionally not well. We may need to learn how to compartmentalize, but you know, sometimes you haven't learned that skill set yet. I haven't learned that skill set yet. So it's doing our best. And for me, my high points were that I went to the gym. I'm looking like I'm on steroids and go mesomorphic body type and, you know, vegetarianism. But no, I was making a food involving, if you ever do fried chicken, you make fried chicken, chicken is not vegetarian. No, it's the frying up the chicken with the flour and the egg. And so I was playing with that. And so I was trying to make something that used way less eggs because I was making omelets with 4 eggs and those can be expensive. So I dropped it down to 2 and try to add flour to it. And that turned into more like a kind of pancake thing that added a bunch of spices to it and made it more flavorful and savory. Um, Sweet is referring to desserts. Savory is referring to more like main dishes or main courses, or um, it's trying to describe the taste or flavor, right? Okay, so savory pancake, and started adding in some lentils and split peas and a little bit of potato by accident. But that ended up where I'm able to just use like 1 egg as opposed to 2 or 4 and have similar protein content. And now it becomes something that I might be able to freeze and or refrigerate and now do meal prep with it with a lot less expensive ingredients, um, like with eggs. And I thought that was pretty cool. And it tasted okay. I like fried foods. But calorie wise, it was lower. And that can also be cooked in an oven. But the thing is that, it's also spending time with my dad. He's older. He's dealing with some health issues. But, you know, because I don't want to be around people sometimes. And I shouldn't allow that to prevent me from spending time with my dad. I need to spend time with my mom and sister because I may talk with audiences or interact with people on a deep level, but my familial relationships aren't that good, at least insofar as what the ideal should be. Sorry, at least that seemed dramatic. Obviously, the caller is stopped. Nothing is not going in reverse with me. That would be interesting. Yes, the whole thing is going flowing in a kind of weird kind of fashion. But, if you made it this far, which maybe it connected in with you because it's sometimes that's where we are at in life, where sometimes a single day is just wandering around, or sometimes that becomes a week. Just and there's no real inspiration except for not dying, or maybe finding something to laugh at. Sometimes you might be the support person that acts like someone to laugh at, or just help them laugh. And it happens. But God works all things out for good and not evil. He means it to be worked out for good. And sometimes it's living that and realizing that, he's making our characters perfect so that way we can talk about it and maybe connect in with one person that this will mean everything to. And in that book that I wanted to do, that's exactly what happened here. A few hundred years removed, but it made a huge impact. I need to get back to writing on that. Bye.